Hello and welcome to the MeasurePod by MeasureLab, the podcast dedicated to the ever-changing world of data and analytics, with your hosts Dara Fitzgerald and Matthew Hewson. Between them, they've spent more years than they'd like to admit wrestling with dashboards, data quality, and the occasional Google curveball. So join us as we share stories about how analytics really works today and where it might be headed tomorrow. Let's get into it.
Hello and welcome back to the MeasurePod. I'm Dara. I'm joined by Matthew, as always. Matthew, how are you today?
I'm good, yeah. All good. Can't complain. Won't complain. How about you?
I will follow your trend. I also won't complain.
Okay, but you're not good. But you just won't complain about it.
Well, listen, if I started, that would become the whole episode. So let's just not go. Let's just not go there.
Let's move on. Yeah.
Maybe we should have that as a little spin-off. We should have our complaints. We could just be old men shouting at clouds for an hour, and that could be a kind of spin-off series.
Just complain about a squeaky cupboard in the kitchen and like just anything that's annoying us slightly. Yeah, we'll do that. No one will listen, but we'll sort that out.
Well, I tell you what, I have been complaining, and you know this because I sometimes share my abusive prompts with you when I'm slightly bullying towards Claude at times, but that's the one thing I've been complaining about a lot lately. I swear something's changed in the language that Claude's using, and it's like he's trying to. I'm saying I'm not only am I anthropomorphizing, but I'm also assuming he gives me guy vibes. There's definitely a kind of a
Claude is a male name, isn't it? Primarily, I suppose.
I don't know. In Ireland, Claude is a pretty common female name. I know a lot of my mum's name. My mum's name is Claude.
Oh, of course it is. Yeah. I did meet a lovely woman.
She is. Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, it is. It's not just me. I think inferring that it's a male. But anyway, sorry. My rant is that it's adopted this almost like this kind of like I imagine it being like an American uni, like a frat boy. It's got this almost frat boy kind of like, yeah, if you want to like drop in an extra beat in that, and you're like, what do you mean beat? We're talking about, like, I'm asking you business questions and you're talking about dropping beats. What are you doing? It's like it's adopted this kind of like, or it's like, cool dad. It's like it's trying to be hip and down with the kids, and it's really getting
Steve Buscemi meme. Hello, fellow kids.
Exactly that. Yeah. So I think one of the I think I might share this with when you said something like you just like stop talking like that. You sound like an idiot.
It's funny though because I did notice that because obviously you get used to ChatGPT Claude's language, and like one thing that Claude loves is a smoking gun. He loves saying smoking gun, but I was using ChatGPT, and ChatGPT was spitting out smoking guns left, right, and centre as well. So there is, yeah, I suppose they're both based on the same corpus of knowledge, but still, it's
But that's worrying because that means that is human language boiled down to its simplest form, which is really that's like if you took it's like it's saying this is an average human. This is the way an average human talks, which is slightly depressing.
I'm not always talking about smoking guns.
I know. Listen, honestly, I'm fed up hearing about you and smoking guns. The other recent one is we will get onto the topic. This is just a brief. Yeah, this is just a brief little tangent to kick us off. Just an icebreaker. But the other one lately is it keeps saying like, "Let me be straight with you."
Yeah.
Have you noticed that if you push back, and it's like, and the most annoying thing about it is, it's like, I wish you were straight with me the first time because you're saying this now because I've called you out.
Yeah, let me be straight. Like, look, I've been bullshitting you before, but this time I'm down the line.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting you to actually ask me if this was correct or not. So now that you've called me out, I'm going to be honest about it. And it's like, well, yeah, thanks for being straight with me after me challenging you.
You can almost see the prompt behind the chat, the tool, can't you? You can imagine what they're saying and tweaking and trying to get it to behave in particular ways.
Yeah, definitely. But what I need to do, I think you might have said something like this the other day, or at least it made me think of this. I think what I need to get better at doing is separating out its actual like functional capability from the language it's using, because it's really frustrating me and I'm getting hung up on the way it's answering things and the way it's talking, rather than actually focusing on appreciating the advancements in what it can actually do. So I think I need to just remind myself that it is just a the output bit is just like a predictive text model, and it's just saying what it thinks is the right thing to say. And I need to stop thinking it's an annoying colleague that's just getting on my nerves.
You have to talk to.
Yeah. Just focus on its actual output, like its coding output, or its the quality, the content of what it's saying, rather than the actual wording. And then maybe I'd get a bit less annoyed.
When I'm coding with it, I barely read what it's saying to me, to be honest.
Yeah, you're better off. Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
just sort of scan through plans and then enact, and I don't listen to its ramblings in between.
Yeah, and actually that's a good point. You kind of need to skip the same, even with the text answers. You kind of need to skip the first sentence and the last sentence, because the first sentence will be something like "Let me be straight with you," and the last sentence will be some like not random, but like a follow-on question that it thinks it's being proactive. So it'll be like, "Oh, so you asked about flux capacitors. Do you want me to like list out every film that Michael J. Fox was ever in?" And you're like, no, I don't. So I'll ask you for that if I wanted. So
would you like me to accelerate the chat to 88 miles an hour?
Yes, I would. Yes, I would. Yeah. Anyway, moving swiftly on from the rant corner onto news. What's happened? What have we got? Everything and nothing, as always.
Yeah, I think it's worth talking in the first instance about how hilariously out of sync our news segments have been over the past couple of podcasts. Like Dara's been away, so we've recorded a couple ahead of time. And I think in the last couple of podcasts, we were talking about this mythical Fable or mythos model that might be coming our way. And all the time not being able to talk about the fact that whilst Fable had actually already come out by the time those podcasts had come out and been taken away and come back again, and we're still like, 4.8's out and Fable Mythos might be coming. So that's the reason these things have been so hilariously off the mark in terms of the news, that and the pace at which every bloody thing was moving. But yeah, moving forward, we're going to try and sort of record the news segment on the week where the podcast comes out, so we aren't that out of sync. But I think that's just another example of how quick things are moving. Is it how ridiculously out of whack it can get so quickly?
Really is. Like in the not that I'm going to say the old days, which is really not that long ago, we would occasionally be scrambling to pull together. If we're recording these every other week, you'd be trying to make sure you've got enough news to cover.
Yeah.
And since, to be fair, that hasn't really happened since the focus has been more on kind of AI, because there just has been so much in that space for the last couple of years. But yeah, going back even further beyond that, it used to be a bit of an effort to try and think, well, what's newsworthy? Whereas now it's like, yeah, we record it and then think, oh no, that's like almost immediately. We should just be, I think we might have made this joke before, but we might just need to like record our entire day and then just cut out all the noise and just post it, just have like a regular, almost real time news.
Yeah. I think that's the only way. But we're recording this news segment a week out from this podcast released. And I think the items that are in the news item are stable enough that they are still going to be relevant when this comes out. Maybe just a little bit old news, but it should be relevant still. So
well, I'm going to be bold and say that Fable is or is not available currently.
Yeah, I think that's you heard it here first. That's an exclusive.
But yeah, that doesn't help, does it? It's now become even more. It's not just what's being released, but it's what's actually allowed to be. There's like layers now. It's like the government are getting involved in the US. That's complicating things even further. So it's not even like and not just the government. There's also the thing that we complain about quite a lot, which is some models or features or whatever come out, but they're US only, and so it's not just a case of is something out or not. Is it out for us? Is it out for everybody? Is it out for select companies only?
Yeah, it's a headache, an exciting headache, but it's a headache. Right, the news. So I think literally as we record this yesterday, the big news is that ChatGPT has released a new model in GPT 5.6, their new frontier model. This was there's a couple of subjects I think I'm going to come on to briefly. So one about this blocking of models and things, because 5.6 was blocked. It kind of got stuck in the same checks as the US government. Although it did occur to me the other last night when I was thinking about it, I was wondering if they just thought, we've got to try and get our model blocked by the US government, otherwise it's not going to look as good as Anthropic's Fable model.
Yeah, that would be quite a clever marketing ploy, wouldn't it?
Yeah, like, we can't just release a model that the government doesn't block us. That looks so terrible. But anyway, yes, it's been in hiatus a little bit, and then they've released it to people, like testers around the world. They got a little video on the site at the minute, which is like, one example is some Japanese farmer who they gave the model to help automate his farm. So they've not given it to like big tech. They seem to have given it to individuals, and it's slightly odd use case, but there you go.
You'd love to know how that like did they email them? Did they send them a letter in the post? Like, how did they contact this Japanese rice farmer?
I assume it was very much like the opening scenes of Harry Potter. Some Hagrid type figure seeked him out and rewarded him with the 5.6. So they finally released it, and they're comparing it to Fable, and it beats Fable out in a few instances. Fable way beats it in a couple of others, like the software engineering type bench stuff. Fable's still way out in front. They've really shifted the way they're doing things to be well more in line with Anthropic. So 5.6 comes out with 3 levels: Sol, Terra, and Luna. So Luna being the smallest one, obviously the moon, Terra being the middle model, which is like Earth, and Sol being the big model like Sun, which is like bang on, haiku, sonnet, opus. So they've aligned that. They've also added in a toggle to set like levels, so like min, max, ultra, like exactly as Claude has it up to ultra code. So they've sort of copied that, and then they've at the same time yesterday they released GPT work, which is co-work essentially. It can go off and enact things on connected applications, etc. So yeah, the models, we can briefly talk about the power of them, but I thought it's really interesting how they've really shifted their model to align with what Anthropic are doing, which I suppose makes sense, because Anthropic, I did briefly see, it's a bit of salt here, I did briefly see that Anthropic are now profitable. That source is from a person on LinkedIn that I can't even remember, and I saw the headline, so it's pretty much confirmed.
Are they a Japanese farmer?
Yeah, it's a Japanese farmer. No, yeah. So I briefly saw that. Take that with the salt with which it comes.
Well, can I pile salt on top of the salt then? Although this might not be salty. I just tried to Google it now, but I can't multitask, so I'm just gonna go with the salt. There is speculation that both Anthropic and OpenAI have confidentially filed their IPOs.
Right. Okay.
So
they're both prepping for them, weren't they?
Yeah. No, I don't know what confidentially. I don't know a lot about the actual process of doing an IPO, but I would have thought that the whole point was it's public. But maybe there's some step where you're kind of informally doing it. I don't really know, and I basically saw this in a couple of headlines, but I haven't dug into whether it's true or whether it's the rumor mill. But the reason
I think it's just a Google form. You just fill in a Google form.
I would imagine so. Yeah.
Yeah, and you just get put on the stock market.
Yeah, answer a couple of basic questions. Yeah. But the reason I mention it in this context, I guess, is like we talked about this last time, didn't we, about how they seem to just be, and it's understandable, but they seem to be just kind of following each other and matching step for step. But maybe there's even more reason for that if they're, with the IPO, if they're really trying to, I don't know, play it safe. Maybe not quite the right way to phrase it, but it's probably not the time to be making any radical moves. So
no, I think they would have to, and I think GPT would have to get it, because we know they're both going for IPOs. Like, it's been known for a while. GPT would have to do something like this, wouldn't they? They'd have to release something to kind of at least feel like they're putting themselves on a level footing with Anthropic before they do that. The big sort of thing they're saying about the models, well, they've undercut Anthropic in price. And a lot of the graphs, when you look on the site, there's a lot of token, essentially how much it costs, the API costs, and how much extra usage you get out of, like how much extra power you get out of a model. I presume that's by moving that toggle up to ultra or spinning up agents. And it's kind of showing a steeper curve for, say, the GPT models, where they are reaching higher utility quicker, cheaper, rather than the Claude ones that have a steadier incline to more expensive and power output or intelligence output or whatever unit we measure these things with. So yeah, I think it's similar sort of level, but I don't think it's I don't think it's a Fable level model 5.6 Sol, but and I think other people are saying it, but it's quicker in some ways, snappier. Yeah.
It's getting complicated, isn't it? With it was really from the get-go, but even more so now, where it's like they're splitting, like each AI company has got its different tiers, then they're splitting sometimes with sub tiers, and then you've got maybe OpenAI is better for one thing. Even in our comparison, the last episode when we were comparing Claude Code against Codex, I had to think about that for a second, which is not a good sign for OpenAI. But when we were comparing them, it was like Claude Code was overall better quality, but in some cases, Codex was quicker. It was maybe cheaper, and maybe even more. So, like for what I was playing around with, it actually did a better job, but the code quality wasn't deemed to be as good. So there's so many different axes that you could be comparing these different things on. It's getting complicated, and then when you introduce cost into that as well, which links to something we'll probably talk about in the news section in a minute, but this kind of almost this kind of the cost of it is becoming more spread, isn't it? Where you've got the newer models are potentially becoming more expensive, but then you've got the cheaper models are getting cheaper, but then it might be cheaper per token, but are you using more tokens because you're using more agents? And it's becoming complicated for people to know which model to use, which not just even which model, but which model from which company should be used for what task. It's not straightforward.
Yeah, and on what power scale for each model as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's part, one of the things. So 5.6 is quicker, and it scored higher on I forget what benchmark this is. It's like the work benchmark, as in just performing tasks and sort of agentic capabilities. I think kind of like a co-work type thing. So it's almost like some models, if you're using co-work, you would be better using model X, or if you're using ChatGPT work, you'd be better using model X and not this frontier model. But if you're using code, and they're almost tailoring them to the different levels and use cases. And like you say, it used to just be go in, pick top one, and ask question.
Yeah, it's not so easy anymore. Yeah,
nuanced now. Yeah,
and that makes me think of something that actually we didn't wasn't on our list for the news, but I just thought of it now, and I haven't read much into it. I don't know if you have. I just saw a headline this morning about Fugu, I think it's called Fugu. It's a Japanese. I think the company is Sakana, and Fugu is the AI model, or I don't know if you'd even call it. I think there is a model, but it's also like an orchestrator, so it can make decisions of which other models from other frontier AI companies it uses. And somebody on Medium was talking about it. I haven't seen anything else about it yet, but it seems like it's building up a bit of interest. Because what it made me think of is so when everything got really crazy around OpenClaw and all the kind of harnesses and everything, and that's all died down a little bit now. It does seem like there's kind of a space for some kind of like orchestrator level to become a lot more popular now, like even among like the wider, beyond just power users, even where if companies are starting to look at like what models to use for what tasks, it's like there's a layer that's obviously not going to be provided by Anthropic or OpenAI because they're going to want you to use their models, but almost like a space there for a gap in the market for somebody to come along and say, look, we'll plug into any of them and we'll make sure you're using the right model for the right job.
And that's what's his face has come out. I know his name, but I can never say it right. CEO of
John Smith, Dario
Amodei, something like that, right? Yeah, Dario Amodei. He's come out saying how dangerous open source models are, because they're getting more and more powerful. And to your point, right at the top of the podcast, like as the hardware gets better, the more that people could just run these models by themselves. And I saw an interesting take the other day that Apple might have played a blinder because they know that ultimately people are going to be running models on their phones, and they're going to own the hardware, which will service the open source LLM world at some point down the line. And if they just keep maintaining and building out the hardware that will be the vehicle for open source, they're laughing.
We called it.
Yeah, yeah. I can't remember what we said.
Can't remember what we said. Can't remember when we said it. But I'm vaguely sure we said Apple are a dark horse here. They're playing the long game.
Yeah, I'll agree with you. I don't know what we said, but yeah, I agree with you. I think I reckon they listened to that and decided to do what we said in that podcast. Yeah.
We're not sure what we said before, and also this hasn't actually happened yet, but we're very confident that we were right about a thing we may have said that hasn't yet happened.
Yeah. Yeah. But the other thought, the only other wrinkle in that is if somebody comes out with a brand new product category that nobody can foresee, that sort of puts Apple on the back foot. But ultimately, currently, they own the majority share of the biggest hardware, category in the world. So they could just be sitting waiting for the things to drop into their laps. People have kept trying to build this new hardware, but it could just all have been an app. So
I've got it right here.
Oh yeah, the pencil's coming.
It's the humble pencil. Yeah. I mean, yeah, hardware is at the risk of taking us off down another tangent. Like we did talk about this a good while back about saying, like the software is way outrunning the hardware, not just even in terms of the chips, but like the actual like AI is not really. We're not getting the best out of it by typing or even speaking into a box. There's got to be some more, what would you say, like more application suitable? I don't know, I'm trying to think of a clever way of saying it, but there's got to be a more kind of purpose-built piece of hardware that takes full advantage of this. It's like we're trying to shoehorn a very new technology into something that we've been using for quite a long time, and it's not really the right. It's not the right hardware at all.
No, and it is interesting that voice models have that's kind of taken us some way there, but nowhere near as far as and I think you're the same. I very rarely type as much as I used to. Like sometimes I find myself typing and think, what am I doing? And I'm starting to get into that. I think because I don't type as much anymore, I'm like tongue out, clicking away with my index fingers. But yeah, that's changed the way I interact with my computer. Full stop. I don't even think about it anymore. But it is a pretty seismic shift in how I interact with my computer. But yeah, like you say, if you get into that point and you got these frameworks and what's the word I always forget, like your open clause and things, harnesses. Yeah, you don't, and you can just talk to a device and it go off and do things. And loop engineering, where people are now saying, don't prompt your way through the solution, prompt an orchestrator and let it do the rest. Then the interaction with screens and things. I think we're starting to go towards what we were talking about. We're going to talk about later in the podcast, actually.
Yeah, we're just segue masters, but the problem is The problem is the segues come out too early.
Yeah. Everyone remember that segue for later.
Yeah. Okay, so news. So I've lost track completely.
Yeah, no. So that's OpenAI. That's what they've released. New models, but interesting that it's aligning up with Anthropic. Anthropic, I think, like I said earlier, with our all over the place news. I can't remember what we said in the last one, but Fable came back. I don't know if we've touched on that. I think we probably haven't. So Fable came back. Eventually, was released by the government, the American government specifically. And it's been back a week, and then they pushed it another week. Most people will probably remember that it was only ever going to be temporarily available via the subscription model, at which point it was going to drop off and just be an API thing. But they kicked the can down the road to the 12th. So this Sunday, it's supposed to go from the subscription model again. They've been saying the whole time they want this to be a temporary thing, and etc. I don't know if ChatGPT 5.6 might force them into keeping it around a bit longer. I don't know. But yeah, it's been back for about a week and a bit now. And I think it's worth just briefly chatting about that whole debacle, because I don't think we covered that either. The fact that the US government stepped in and said, no, you can only use this for American citizens, which was a pretty terrifying precedent to set, really. It kind of put me in mind. This might sound dramatic, but it put me in mind of after the end of World War II, when there's been this sort of international collaboration on the nuclear program, and a lot of British scientists, and then the Americans told Churchill, no, you're not having any of the research or information. It's ours. It's kind of that. It's such a powerful technology to be controlled by a single nation is not good.
Yeah, and so if I seem slightly distracted there for a second, I was trying to just look something up that I'd read about it, which was that the interesting thing around it is how it was done as well. It was using export controls, so it's almost like there was no, like you use the word precedence, because there was no way for them to actually like block something like this. They had to use export controls, which is probably quite a novel way of. Somebody had that bright idea. Someone's probably got a pay rise for thinking of how to do it. But whether that will change, is this going to be a thing now, and is this going to happen more regularly? And are they going to will they come up with some new legislation that actually lets them control this in a different way? And will that hurt the US economy? Because with China, making so much ground, is it going to hurt them? It's obviously a bit of a double-edged sword situation, isn't it, where they're trying to. There's opposing motivations there, isn't there, as to whether they do control it or not?
I suppose it depends on, because I've seen some ideas of how they could control it, because there's already sort of like, even in the UK now, right, with like adult content stuff, there's like checks and IDs and things that you have to step through if you wanted to like get into gambling sites or naughty things. And like I saw some stuff in the US where they maybe have to show their citizenship card and verify that to get access. Because obviously just saying US territory would just be bypassable via VPNs. I mean, that's how I get into most of Google's US only features. So you can see it being enforceable. And I suppose to your other point, it's whether the government decides, well, either it's too dangerous, or if we isolate it to our nation, our productivity across the board in all other industries is going to be so much heightened than everyone else's. Then that's how it increases. That does them a favor to the American economy, rather than the other way around of just an unbelievably exponential export to the rest of the world, I suppose. But it makes me think, and I don't like this line of thinking, but I can't see any way around it, that like the UK, for example, needs to invest heavily in getting their own controlled versions of this technology, because if a nation can just turn it off overnight for you, that's not good.
Yeah, what happened to the? It's just this isn't like this wouldn't be at the national level, but within Europe, there was a couple of good, interesting French, or I say a couple. I know there was one at least. It was like a frontier.
Mistral.
Yeah, well, I haven't heard anything about them since. I don't know if they're still.
They're still going. The last thing I saw about them was essentially a meme. There was all these things saying like Mistral's released a new model, which is called like I couldn't find the name of this Le Chaton Fat. So there was all these rumors going around that Mistral had created this Le Chaton Fat model that was far and away better than Fable, but it turned out to just be a joke, but started by someone that just spread around the internet, and it was just all these pictures of a really fat cat and all these artificial benchmarks destroying Fable and stuff. And then I think Mistral in the end joined in with the joke, and they were posting stuff. So all I've heard about them is that, but they still exist.
Yeah.
Because I was sure like someone like Apple would gobble them up, or but they're a good example of something. Yeah, the European Union could push a lot of money behind to try and own something.
Yeah, because it's dangerous. You're right. It's dangerous if it's the US versus China and they both lock down. Then, like, where does everyone else get left if there's no technology outside of those two superpowers?
Well, maybe we'll just go back to skipping around in fields and daisies, and they can just sort of destroy themselves in their little buckets, and we'll just get rid of our computers, touch grass.
Sounds quite nice. I love your idealistic view of the past, and we just all skipped around in fields with daisies.
That's what I mean. There wasn't wars or anything, was there? I think that's just all we did.
No, just all happy times, rainbows, and
yeah. It's roughly how I remember it.
Yeah. So one other thing. Sorry, were you done there? I keep losing track. I don't even know what you were talking about.
Yeah, I think so. It's just those are I just wanted to vent my worries about that precedent of locking down the tech. I think I've successfully vented.
There was one other thing I was going to mention, which we kind of covered a little bit in what we were just talking about there, which is around this. So there's a couple of things prompted this for me. There was, I think it was a CNBC article which was talking about how the idea of like tokenmaxxing of companies being incentivizing their developers to use as many tokens as possible to produce useful AI outputs. That those days are kind of coming to an end, and one clear example they gave was Uber, who used their entire annual AI budget in 4 months. And there's kind of a few articles floating around I've seen around this, and it goes back to what we were saying about the kind of the cost becoming, maybe the workhorse models are getting cheaper and tokens are getting cheaper, but people are using more agents, so that's ramping up the cost, even if the cost per token is getting cheaper. And then the new models that are coming out, they tend to be more expensive. Anthropic have shifted companies like, I think Uber were one of the first, weren't they, where they moved them away from that. They said you can't use the subscription model, you have to pay as you go. So it's this broader, I kind of wanted to bring up just this broader sense that there's a few aspects to this. I guess one is, are the AI companies coming under increasing pressure to, be profitable? So they're having to not subsidize quite as much. And then with that, there's the trade-off maybe between investors getting impatient, but also that will the hardware catch up and will the costs actually be able to come down? And then the other point to do with all of that is the fact that companies are starting to keep an eye on this more now and be more conscious. Maybe there was a bit of a honeymoon period where companies were saying, just go and spend money because we need to try and invest in this. And now they're smartening up a little bit and thinking, actually, we need to look at what we are doing. And that links back to the point around all these different models and different options within each model, and whether an orchestrator is the way to go. So a bit of rather than a news thing, more of a bit of it seems to be a bit of a theme at the moment. There's a lot of talk around the cost of AI and the different ways of using it, and looking for efficiencies, and also looking at the output and making sure. There was a stat I read, something like 40% of the cost that's spent is actually productive, something like that. This is really salty, actually, but I might dig out the stat and share it in the show notes. it's something like that. There's a point of diminishing returns, basically, where if you spend more, you're not actually achieving more for that. It's really only like a relatively small percentage of the usage actually goes to something that then becomes meaningful. There's a lot of wastage built in, and companies are becoming more and more mindful, as they obviously were going to. So it's kind of a bit of a big sprawling point there, but it's something that seems to be getting a lot more attention now for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, I noticed it with Fable, like how much it can. That's so expensive, and we're on a subscription model, so we get an allowance of Fable. Reset on Sunday, I set it to task and told it to go and spin up agents. I stupidly didn't tell it to specify what type of agents. I think it spun up a lot of Fable agents, and I used my 5-hour Fable window in, I think, a minute and a half. And then it came back up. I said, "I'll use 4.8 in Sonnet 5 agents. Don't spin up agents of Fable." And I think within 3 minutes, it had used up my next 5-hour window and my entire weekly usage. So what I want to go back and look at what that would have cost from an API perspective, because I can imagine hundreds and hundreds of pounds for 2 or 3 minutes of output.
Yeah.
So it's like you've definitely got to be cleverer. And I noticed like Anthropic is much more free with the amount of agents it can spin up, because I've had instances where it's spun up 170 agents, for example. Whereas the new releases from GPT, the agents it can spin up are like between 4 and 16, much more contained. I think there's a difference in the way they're architected. I think Claude does it as code, so it's not bloating the context, whereas ChatGPT is literally spinning up in context agents. But anyway, yeah, slight side point, but yes, there's definitely going to be more and more techniques and approaches to sort of stave off spending all that money on the most frontier models.
Yeah, well, maybe this leads in, maybe this is a slightly more forced segue, but it does lead a little bit into our topic, because I think this could be an area that becomes an area of like focus for people within their roles. It could be something somebody manages, where they're looking at, token optimization, or looking at efficiency across using, and even just best fit models for different purposes. So yeah, if you forgive me for that pretty rough and ready segue, our topic today is around the kind of human skill question, and how the role of, probably for us, we're going to talk a lot about analysts and engineers, but really it probably will apply more broadly across certainly all knowledge work in time. But how is that evolving with the kind of agentification of everything? So this is something that's come up. I mean, it's come up in bits and pieces, and actually it was also a topic a good while ago for an episode, which was before you and I were hosting the MeasurePod. It was back when Dan and Bav did, and they looked at the evolving role of the analyst. But it's something that comes up as a theme that kind of comes up a lot, or has come up a lot recently, about how roles in our industry, but really it is a lot broader than that. It's like, how is AI changing the job, quote unquote? So for us, we are going to obviously think about analytics, data analysis, engineering, but we're probably going to veer a little bit beyond that as well, because it's kind of hard, isn't it? It's hard to talk about specific jobs when actually there's a lot of debate and discussion in society as a whole around how AI, and a lot of it's clickbaity, and it's the usual polarized stuff. AI is going to wipe out all jobs, or AI is going to make us all live in a Star Trek utopia. So there's a lot of stuff on either end, but I think if we can certainly start where we know the most, which is around our own industry, but I would imagine we will end up broadening it out a little bit too. And probably the catalyst maybe for doing another dedicated episode on it is around the kind of rise of agents, and the fact that it does feel like there's been another step change. Probably when we last properly talked about this, it was around like, it was still very much kind of in the early days maybe of LLMs, and it was kind of pre-agent, or certainly before agents were being used quite as widely as they are now. So it's almost like a bit of a check-in, isn't it? It's a kind of I will probably cover this again. It's a bit of a kind of almost like a snapshot of like, where are things at now? What are the skills that are most required? How's that changing? What do we think the future looks like?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's something, not just this subject, I think lots of subjects we're probably going to have to keep coming back over and over again, because, I mean, you use the term in the early days, which makes it sound like the 50s, but it was probably 8 months ago. So yeah, and it's, I mean, I'm trying to think where to start, really. I mean, maybe we could start on a specific one of those two our world type things, like from the analysts analysis side of things, and then we've seen some pretty significant changes in visualization capability for one, right? Because we've traditionally, it's like, right, well, let's use Looker Studio to build a dashboard on top of whatever, that's free and easy, or you've got your more enterprise level platforms. But with how good these models have got at spinning up lightweight HTML, JavaScript-y pages and use JavaScript visualization libraries, you can get some really compelling, nice-looking, dynamic dashboards and tell different data stories in a different way a lot quicker. They look a lot more compelling, and they're so easy to produce that it almost kind of, in my mind, moves you away a little bit from these static visualization engines where you're just sort of plugging things in. So it's a different skill set. It's sort of it's briefing the agent again to go and do the thing, and then sort of collaboratively working on the output.
Yeah, it is, and it's not just the. I mean, that equally applies across the other kind of aspects of maybe what you would call the kind of like what has in the past been the kind of the hard yards of like. So yeah, building. You ask anyone who's built Looker Studio dashboards or Power BI or Tableau or whatever, it's painful. It's a painful process. Nobody. I'm going to go out on a limb and say nobody really enjoys it. Maybe some people don't mind doing it, but I don't know that anyone has really enjoyed that. That's not why you become an analyst. You become an analyst to answer questions, to tell a story, to kind of find areas for improvement or spot issues, and then figure out how to kind of resolve them, look for patterns in data, all that kind of stuff. But it's always been it's an arduous task, isn't it? Kind of wrangling data into a dashboard. And similarly with the other, whether you're kind of like a SQL type analyst and you're working in databases, or even if you're somebody in a company where you work with spreadsheets and you create some charts based on that, whatever, even that now, it's like you don't have to do anything in a spreadsheet anymore. The AI tools can all do that for you. They can write SQL for you. So they can help you set up a database. Even where the line blurs between being an analyst and an engineer, you can use AI to do some of the bits that you might have previously needed to go to an engineer. So an analyst can become an engineer, vice versa. So all of that kind of heavy lifting is the caveat here. Obviously, you've got to, there are issues and it's not perfect, and you do need to obviously know what you're asking for and how to check that what comes back is what you asked for and is useful and all the rest of it. But a lot of the stuff that would have taken the real bulk of time before, cleaning the data, sorting it out, getting it into whatever format you need, and then turning it into some kind of presentation layer or some kind of story, the time involved in that is just reduced down like almost to nothing, minutes rather than hours or days or weeks. So with all of that kind of, maybe grunt work's not the right way to put it, but that kind of heavy lifting, all of that kind of the hard yards, that frees up, and this, I guess, is the question: is it frees people up to do something else with their time? So what is that something else, and where does the human still add some value in that way? The human in the loop, and what's the interplay between how much can you offload versus what do you still need to do as the human analyst?
Yeah, a couple of points on that, I guess. It occurs to me that the grunt work is an ever-evolving, like more things are dropping into the grunt work category, where previously it would never have been considered grunt work, but just because of now the ease with which you have, the alternative can do it with such ease, it just becomes categorized as grunt work, where it used to may have been some deep skilled piece of something or other. That just popped into my head. But I think like the outputs of these things are great, and like you say, from an analyst point of view, delving into the data, understanding the data, finding patterns, building stories. What I see happening in, say, I see the job roles broadening out. So let's stick with our industry for a second. I could see a world where an analyst, data engineer, data scientist, visualization expert all kind of become one and the same person. And it's just an individual who is very good at wrangling the tech, understanding the particular domain, and sort of working diligently and communicating that back out at the other end. If they have those skills, they'll be able to deliver on a wider range of deliverables, because they kind of have unlimited experts at their fingertips to point things at. And I think what I see happening with, say, like an analyst role in the immediate term is it maybe moves away a little bit from endless digging into data, and instead moves into facilitating LLMs to dig into data, which would be around semantics and around layering context on top of that data. And I think that's why, Google's put a lot of stock in their knowledge catalog and having all the semantics and metadata about data. That's why we've created and built Seam internally. I think that's going to be such a huge point, because as soon as an LLM can understand what the hell's there, then it becomes so much easier to produce compelling stories, compelling visualizations, compelling work.
I think you're right. It's like this kind of idea of almost like being a custodian of the definitions and a lot of that context. And I want to try my best to stay on point, but I'm at risk of just spinning it off. But like, I guess a question for you, just keen to get your take on this, is like, I think in the here and now, it's undeniable that there's real need for people who have the context, the context that the AI won't have yet and can't have, and a lot of that domain knowledge and the business knowledge. And you said the words in when you were describing the skills that would be needed, like the communication aspect. I think that's more vital than ever, isn't it? Because it's communication on two ends. It's taken the business need and translating that into something that you can put into an LLM or an AI tool, and then also translating what comes back to the wider business. And that kind of has always been the real, if you boil it down, that kind of has been the core of being a good analyst, I think, in the past. And that's probably not going to change, but it's the stuff around it and what you do to get that, from the input to the output. That's the bit that's maybe changing. But all of that kind of like context and the business definitions and the semantics and all the rest of it, do you think that's a short term? Do you think once that's baked in, like will the AI technology get good enough that once there's enough business context across any individual business, but also across businesses as a whole, is that just another area where it's going to get smarter and smarter? And do you think it'll reach a point where that context doesn't need to come from a human? Or do you think there's always going to be knowledge, context, nuance that's not going to be able to be captured fully by a machine and would need some kind of human involvement? Big question.
Yeah, I think probably eventually, no, I think it does get there, because so right now one of the big limitations of models is that they can't learn on the fly. So there are going to be, like you say, nuances and differences and quirks to same businesses in the same domain. They're going to be slightly different, work slightly different, have different approaches, maybe slightly different offerings. So it won't just be able to go in with one knowledge of one domain and away it goes. But as soon as and this is a problem I know that has been actively pursued right now, as soon as it's able to sort of update its thinking and tailor itself and almost learn on the fly, then it's kind of a solved problem then, because you can put it into a business, have it start to explore and find areas and feed that back into itself, and it kind of just becomes it makes itself a domain expert. But how far down the line that is, I don't know. And I think the other limiting factor here that slows any of this down is the pace. It's the pace of differing industries. Some are going to be on it and they're going to be moving quickly and they're going to be adopting this stuff quicker. Uber is probably a good example, essentially a technology company, a disruptor in their own right originally, and they've jumped on this quickly. But then you've got industries like education or healthcare and healthcare administration anyway, things like that are just going to take a long time to adopt this stuff, and job roles may stay more static in those places than they do in wider industries. And it may be that you can imagine whole industries essentially being complicit with plodding along, like everyone in that industry will just stay here, and what may kick them into gear is disruptors entering in, because everyone can build things, everyone can create amazing stuff, a disruptor appears, and then all of a sudden everyone's going to be forced into action. So yeah, I think that's the main limiting factor in it going where you're describing, that eventual, they can just do whatever they want. Agents can just take over.
I think you're right, and I think the other thing I think that maybe sits alongside that is even if you have a very progressive industry or company, and so take Uber even, they might be fully bought into using the AI and they might be using agents for a lot, but there's still that but I'm going to call it political, but maybe that's not quite the right word, but there's the people aspect. And if different people in different departments, if it's a really forward-thinking AI-savvy company, then you'll have people in finance using AI, you'll have people in marketing using AI, you'll have people in product using AI, but they're still going to be coming up with different even if they're using AI to fully tell them, to plan, to strategize, to tell them what they should do, there's still going to be that human layer where finance says, well, no, we've done our research and we think we should do X, and marketing say, well, we think we should do Y. And that's probably still where there's a role, again, sticking to where we started, which is around kind of the analyst role. I still see a need for a human who, even if they're day to day, what they're working on, what hard skills they need to know, there's a bit that doesn't go away, which is that ability to communicate and mediate and present an objective view of what the effectively its data is, and whether it's outputted from a LLM or whether it's from human effort and going through and looking over different inputs, it doesn't really matter. There's a need for somebody who can kind of pull those different pieces together and give an objective view of what the right course of action is.
Yeah, potentially. I think there'd be less of them in that scenario for sure. And I think to go back to that point earlier about the sort of technology wrangler, communicator, I think there's within any sector or job role, there are people who are brilliant analysts who can delve deep and absolutely their skill and talent is in the technology or the knowledge of going through a piece of analysis, the skill and the understanding of it. I think unless they have the other things, they may begin to struggle more. And I think it's the people who they could just be picked up and put on top of any of the other, and they could be put on top of engineering or visualization. And if they had time to learn that, or if that was their chosen field in the first place, they'd shine in that. I think those are the people that will ultimately bubble to the top because they could then orchestrate across them. So I think it gets smaller. There's less people. So in that scenario where you're saying, there might need to be an orchestrator, there might need to be an arbiter of whatever it is. Yeah, it shrinks. But then I would also say there's a lot of experiments going on of these virtual societies and virtual organizations where there's an orchestrator agent they have different personas and roles, like a marketing team and multiple people within the agents within the marketing team, or there's a CEO, and these different structures where you can imagine them getting smart enough that's the output is compelling. I guess what you're saying there relies on there being some divine spark or something special about how we make decisions or come to conclusions.
Well, yeah, which is that's an interesting interesting observation, because it is something I've been thinking about in preparation for this. One thing just before we kind of go on to that, so it's interesting what you're saying about the first part, because I agree with you that it's that potentially, and this is where it doesn't just apply to analysts. There's a logical kind of train of thought, isn't there, that like as the AI gets better, just in general, there should, in theory, be a need for less specialist people to do these specialist roles when the AI can do that. And you might still need humans ultimately making the decisions, but in theory, there should be a need for fewer of them, because more of that groundwork is being done in an automated, agentic way. But maybe there's a kind of a slight bit of a flip side to that, where you're saying so there might be fewer analysts, but you might also argue that more people would become what you could call an analyst. So somebody who comes from a finance background, I mean, maybe you'd argue they're an analyst anyway, they're a financial analyst, but somebody who may be a lawyer or something, they're then an analyst as well. So
there's the idea of Jevons paradox. Have you come across that?
I've heard it, but remind me what it is.
It's a guy. It was around about the Industrial Revolution, and coal usage was going up, and then someone invented a much more efficient steam engine, and then everyone was predicting the decline of coal use, and he predicted that wouldn't be the case. So the paradox is, I don't think it's actually a paradox, but that's what he calls it. What actually happened is all of these new use cases started to appear for coal when it's cheaper, and when the steam engine is cheaper and more efficient. So railway came out of it, and we started to sort of transport things via railways, and factories started to bring in more. So actually coal usage increased when efficiency increased, which was paradoxical. So there's a similar idea in AI that, maybe everyone just starts covering more hats, but more work comes in. So the number of individuals remains, but they just cover a wider area because they can, and we kind of just capability increases, and then the work just expands to fill that new volume. Is the other theory.
Yeah, and that's what's happened at every point with every revolution or every new big technological advancement. That is what's happened to date. So you could argue that's one school of thought, isn't it? That like there's no reason why this wouldn't be any different, and maybe it's like a blurring of. And I guess that's where I was trying to go with the point about maybe the number of quote unquote analysts might reduce, but the number of people who have those same skills might increase. It's like maybe there'll be like a blurring of roles where people are maybe they're not specialists in lots of things, but they have the ability to be specialists because they're augmenting themselves with AI. So they may still have their specific domain area or scope or whatever, but they're also able to broaden that out to a lot of other areas because they're augmented by AI.
Yeah, and I think that is the next logical step, where you almost just have like an individual with a wider view of, like, say, just a data person as a data wrangler and a people wrangler or whatever. And then, I mean, we've talked about it internally at MeasureLab, almost an organizational tree that underneath those individuals are the different agents and personas that service that section of the business. So underneath the data wrangler, there might be an analyst, and there might be a data visualization, and there might be a data engineer, and there might be a implementation expert. And ultimately this person is sort of wrangling and orchestrating those people, because it might be a bridge too far just to have it's probably possible, but for one individual to cover absolutely everything and wrangle all of the different sections and personas of all of these different agents across the board. I think it might get there, but for now, the next logical step feels like just much tighter integration with agents and people in an org.
Yeah, quite possibly. And the whole thing might just drive capitalism into overdrive, because it might be that small companies can be big companies, and big companies can be huge companies, and huge companies can be absolutely behemoth companies, and everybody might just produce more. There just might be more and more output.
We all need really to be striving to, get Elon Musk back over that trillion, just to make sure, that's what we should all be striving for. Make those people really rich.
Yeah.
The fact he's dropped back to like 800 billion or something is sad. It's really sad. I hope he's okay.
It's just not a big enough number, is it?
No.
But it is like, this is the and this has come up a couple of times, and maybe in slightly different contexts. But this idea of like, there's the belief that we're going to free up all this time, but actually, evidence in history does suggest that the more productive society gets, the more productive they seek to become, and it's just a never-ending. So, and we found that too, like n=1 kind of experiments, but with our own, when we on our own journeys where we've been going through exploring all the different kind of uses of AI and like trying all these different things out. And Mark Edmondson, I think he might have been the first guest we had that talked about this, where you're creating all this extra time, but then you have this urge to use that extra time even more productively. So you're becoming more productive, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're freeing up. Well, you are freeing up more time, but then you're doing even more with that free time. And maybe that's part of the kind of human condition, where even if we become more efficient, we'll just find more things to do with those efficiencies to become even more productive.
Yeah, potentially. I think the only thing that gives me pause on comparing this revolution, which I think at this point it's probably undeniable that it's another industrial revolution or alike to the others, is that the fundamental component that we're talking about here is intelligence, and that is so different to anything. Previously it's been our resource or our new technology, but we're literally talking about the fundamental thing that has progressed us as a species over any other on the planet. It's so hard to quantify what that looks like, and there's literally an unknowable point by which, when you reach AGI or beyond, we can't know, because we don't have the capacity to be able to view past that point. So as always, I always just come back to like, it's intelligence. This is the resource is intelligence. So God knows if anything, paradox or precedent matters. It could just be all moot because of what we're actually dealing with.
It's interesting because I was thinking along the same lines, where, because that's what a lot of, you'll have done the same. I've heard people on podcasts, I've read stuff that people have written, and people who are really in the know, people who are kind of like right at the front edge of this stuff, and they've compared back against the other big, the electricity, the internet, the printing press, all of this, and they're basically saying, look, it's no different each time around. People have worried, said this is going to wipe out jobs, it's going to, ruin society, whatever. And maybe there's been a period each time where things have been, because they have, like each time around, a lot of jobs are lost, but then new jobs get created that didn't exist before, and things kind of find a way of, maybe not everyone would agree they balance out, but on a wider level, they kind of balance out. But the difference, like you were saying, the difference this time around, at least potentially, is that so before, what the new technology did was let humans focus on that higher level work. So they abstracted themselves and thought, right, well, instead of like hand weaving, I'm now going to supervise machines that hand weave, or I'm now going to design machines that hand weave. There was like a level above that we could move ourselves to, that was like a cognitive level. But with AI, it's actually chasing the same step up above that we would want to move into. So if that gets cracked, that if AGI, and you're right, like none of us can really fully wrap our head around what that would mean, but potentially that is going to fill that step that we would have otherwise moved into.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a lot of these, what annoys me about a lot of takes in these podcasts and alike is they're all very binary, right? It's like, yeah, but in previous industrial revolutions, new jobs that we've never thought of or even anyone ever conceived of have been created. Okay, but that will still happen. There will still be new jobs created that nobody has ever thought of. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's like a little pile of new jobs and then a giant tidal wave coming over the top of it. The two, just because new jobs will be created doesn't mean problem solved. It just means new jobs that we haven't thought of will be created. So I think, yeah, it can be way too binary and way too sort of like black and white.
Like with everything.
Yeah. And you're right. Like the higher order stuff that we've been moving up into is kind of vanishing. So much so that it's more, people are viewing moving back into the physical world as the step. Like that's our remaining domain is physical. Become a plumber, become a woodworker. I mean, robotics is advancing pretty quickly now, but
yeah,
it won't be forever. But that's the sort of temporary measure. Start plowing fields.
You do get a bit of hope when you watch. Did you see that video that went around a little while ago? There was like in China, they have robots running marathons and half marathons alongside humans, and there was like a compilation video of all these like robots falling flat on their faces. But it only gives you brief hope because it's not going to be long before that advances as well. So you're right, the physical world isn't necessarily going to be a safe haven.
No. And the advanced, I've been watching similar videos where it looks at those kind of robots you just described, and then robots of like 2026, and even the improvements is unbelievable. I think, and the tech is getting cheaper. The motors, the dynamos, everything is just getting so cheaper to produce on that side. There's definitely some pretty interesting things coming from robotics. I mean, I do think like the dexterity of laying down under a sink and trying to sort of get around something and do whatever it's got to be a long way off, surely. So I think any plumbers and electricians listening are probably
yes and no, because you think are we really purpose built for that job? You can't think we are. There's got to be.
You have like a sink robot that just does that exact thing.
Yeah, it's just specialized because it's the only thing it can do.
Yeah. A massive van pulls up and then there's all these different robots for the different parts of the house drive out.
So going back to so pulling this back to what where we started a little bit. So and something you said earlier about like what is this kind of unique spark that we have as humans. So if we take let's not restrict ourselves. We could talk about analysts, or we could talk about anybody in any knowledge working job. What's the bit that we still? What are the bits that we still add? So we're all augmented. We're using agents. We don't have to do a lot of the toil that we had to do before, whether we call it grunt work or not. What's safe? What skills or characteristics or competencies can we focus on or feel safe that we have, that we can still add value in addition to having some of these kind of tasks and this the tactical stuff done by AI?
Now,
I thought you were just going to say nothing. We don't.
Well, no, I think that's kind of my question there. Right now, I could probably list some things. Down the line, I don't know that I do. Nothing obvious jumps out to me as like we have that couldn't be replicated. But now, like, I think our ability and efficiency in the way we can collaborate and communicate certain things and concepts is higher. Our ability to sort of absorb and tailor to an individual domain is there. Like, all these models are just giant black boxes of everything, but where we can be more nuanced and expert in smaller fields. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I liked how you split it in two, because that's where my head was going as well. It's like what is there now? And this is it's a really philosophical question, isn't it? Because I think I'm sure you did the same. Went and did some actual reading for this, but then I also just had a chat with Claude, and the stuff that comes back immediately, it's like things like taste, it's decision making, it's judgment. It's all of these kind of like things that we do kind of hold dear and think, oh, that needs it needs a human. And obviously then there's things that kind of go more into there may be not kind of specific things like that, but there's obviously the ability, like people at the moment, the way things are currently, people I think give more stock to, like if you told me something, it depends what it was, I might think it was salty, but if you told me something, I'd give that more weight to maybe something that I felt might have been hallucinated by an AI. But even that will change. So there's things at the moment where we like human contact, we like knowing that we're hearing from someone from their own lived experience, versus something that's just come from the big soup pot of human text that is AI.
I think there's an irony in what you're saying. I think underneath what you're saying, what humans remain good at is non-data driven decision making.
Yeah. Which is that something to be good at? Is that a bit of a
But it is like, say in the analytics industry for years we've been fighting against C level or high up folks in an industry just sort of going with their gut and making decisions in that way and saying no, use data, measure, make informed data driven decisions, and that will improve things. If there's data to back up decisions, then ultimately an LLM is going to be good at spotting the pattern and making a recommendation. So what's left is the non-data driven decision making, where you just kind of go, yeah, I reckon this, or I trust somebody more because of this.
I gave you one job before the podcast, which was to stop me going dystopian, and I try my very best, and then you actually do the opposite, and you try and just steer me straight into the void. I was almost playing devil's advocate there. I was thinking, like, what is, because it is hard to avoid, and this is where we are going to go. I'm not even going to apologize. This is worth thinking about. It's worth talking about, and everybody should be thinking about this. So I'm not going to apologize for going dystopian, but it's hard to not go to that logical conclusion, isn't it? Because it does feel a little bit like clutching at straws. It's like, oh, we can do this thing, but most of those things that you can think of, AI will be able to do them in time.
It's pace. It's just pace with which we move through it. It feels to me like pace with which we move through it, and the different industries and how quickly they move through things. Ultimately, if things keep improving on this exponential curve, which they have been doing for a number of years, we had like a blip last year. Everyone was like, it's over, and then like Fable comes out and blows everyone's heads off. It's like, right, well, clearly not yet. There still seems to be a more compute, more inference, higher exponential output. If that trend continues, and I don't see how there can be any other conclusion to I don't know how to finish that sentence, to think more and more things being taken over by LLMs. The only other thing we've got going us for right now, back to your token point, is in some instances we're probably cheaper.
Yeah.
Like a dev is probably cheaper over the course of a year.
Yeah.
But interestingly, not for the same output.
No.
But like you say, you fill the void with the work you do, and that costs a lot more money. It's a minefield.
It is a minefield. What about, so like often the talk is around like judging the output, maybe, like, so, and again at the moment, so let's just say forget about where it goes in the future. Right now, there's a need to verify what comes out. There's a need to kind of like then maybe tailor that into a message for other humans or whatever. But what about the input? Do you think the AI can get to a point where it can also tell us what we want in the first place? Because say it gets really, really good at, if you've got enough data, it can understand that data and it can tell you what to do to achieve the goal that you want to achieve. Can it also get to a point where it can tell us what the goal should be in the first place?
I think so. If it can start to do that sort of absorbing and understanding and self-learning of domains, then it can kind of start to put together the pieces of like, because ultimately any goal it makes would be a sub goal. Every organization roughly has our goal, right? They're trying to achieve our thing. That's the very point of an organization even existing. And that can be like a business organization. It can be a societal organization. They all have some reason for being, some ultimate overarching goal. I think an LLM creating sub goals underneath that to achieve the ultimate goal is possible.
Scary. I'm just trying. Is this episode going where we hoped it would? Is it going where we thought it would?
Well, I don't know. I think, yeah, we started off brighter, but then I think this is reflective of the subject, right? The longer you think about it and the deeper you delve and the more you scratch, you just keep adding answers to that, and inevitably it's hard to. There's no one big obvious block, but it's like they aren't getting past that. LLMs aren't smashing through that human, like I said, divine spark. That is ours forever. I think people made that mistake with the creativity stuff and the ability for it to produce images and music and all those sorts of things. And listen, I'm no arbiter of art quality, and I can appreciate that people will say, "But it isn't creativity or whatever." But people thought that it would never get anywhere near that. Like, it's not going to be able to produce a picture or something that looks like this or could win an art contest. That's ours. That's our special little domain. But then it did. First, it did that first.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it is what it is.
Well, it is, and like no one. Two things are absolutely true. One is that nobody knows for sure. There's a lot of, and you can talk to, and even people we've had on, and like we've only had, like, even if you take the guests that we've had on, and we've had people's takes on this, like they even barely scratch the surface of all the different kind of thinking there is around all this. And one thing for certain is nobody knows for sure. Because we don't have, like, all we can judge it on is how it's improved from where it was before to where it is today. And it may stall. There's so many, it could stall, and then we'll spend years and years making the most of what we already have, because we've made that point before where even if the advancements stopped tomorrow, there'd still be huge gains to be had from what it can already do that people aren't taking advantage of yet.
And we said that, the point at which we said that compared to the technology now is hilarious. Like it's moved on so much since then that what's left on the table is like smoke sitting on a giant pile of gold. It's like it's mad how much opportunity is still there, and it's like it just keeps getting bigger, and we're not scratching. Nobody's able to sort of consume it all.
Yeah, it's so anyway. So we don't. So no one knows for sure. And then the other thing is the pace. So even if things do change beyond recognition, we don't know over what time period that's going to happen. Because there are going to, it's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be a switch necessarily that just like one day we wake up and realize that overnight, like everything is completely and, irreversibly changed. It's going to be a phase thing. And whether that phasing happens over a year or a decade or a century or longer, we don't know for certain, do we? But I think we certainly agree, and I think probably a lot of people who listen to this podcast, or a lot of people who are either within AI specifically, or just within tech, and people who have an interest in this. I don't think anyone would disagree that this is a big turning point, and it is going to be a point where people look back and go, that was a pivotal moment. I don't think anybody could deny that.
Not anymore. There was, maybe a year or so ago, there was those detractors, but their voices have quieted down a fair amount now. There's still detractors in various forms that focus very much. They always focus on the now, like the cost of this or whatever. But they're only the temporary hurdles that it's easy to see how they're overcome. This intelligent stuff will get cheaper, and I think it's all about. it's all about a couple of different factors to how quick it moves. If the technology becomes cheap enough, and it's sort of orchestration becomes easy enough, then I can see things moving quickly, because individuals within organizations can cheaply and efficiently start to deploy it to complete meaningful work. At that point, it's like the stakeholders, the board members take over, and it's like, well, what is the cheapest and most efficient way of us delivering on this thing? And that has always won out, unfortunately, within capitalism, and that's how I could see it rapidly moving over a couple of years rather than decades.
But there's an offset against that as well. So if that's the way corporations go, there's also then the flip side, which is individuals can almost be corporations or look like them overnight. So there's going to be even if it does go that way, where it's like, right, everybody can do everything, then there's going to be a bit of a battle between existing big companies who maybe start thinking, okay, well, we can achieve the same productivity and the same profitability with far less staff. But on the flip side of that, you're going to have a lot of people thinking, I could basically be Salesforce tomorrow, or I could be, maybe not Google, but I could be a big software company tomorrow if I want to be. And go back to your point that you made earlier about some of the slower industries, and disruption might be the thing that actually spurs them into action. That there's tons of opportunities out there now for that. Anybody with a bit of entrepreneurialism could go out and disrupt an industry today or tomorrow. I like to think we're inspiring. This podcast episode is going to be a turning point as well. We're going to have a load of people go out and disrupt industries as a result of this.
Yeah, go out and take down. Everyone just strive to take down Google. Build a new search engine. I mean, Sam Altman said a few years ago, didn't he? I keep saying a few years. One thing this has all done is it's warped my sense of time so much. Like,
he wasn't alive a few years ago, was he?
No, I don't think I was.
He's only 3 or 4 years old.
But he said, like, there will be the first individual company billionaire at some point, which at the time I think was chuckled at a little bit, but now doesn't seem crazy at all. It seems inevitable and in short order, probably. So maybe they do know what we're talking about. But I think, like we said, like, all of this is unknowable. This is just two clowns on a podcast who are trying to predict what the future looks like. It could be completely different and in a complete different direction. One thing that is true is it's probably for most of the people listening to this podcast, because there's probably a high nerd percentage and a high nerd saturation in the audience. It is incredibly exciting and engaging. I'm more excited. I've been more excited and engaged over the past 3 years than I have been at any other point in my career. It really feels like you're living through a piece of history and you're part of it, and even if you're a little piece in the cog, you're sort of, your machinations and your experiments and your discoveries are building into a whole. So, I mean, that's positive, right? We're in history, whatever the outcome is.
Absolutely, and there's no changing that, so we might as well lean into it. And I guess if there's a piece of advice for anyone listening, and that's okay, people listening, but also, like, you'd love to get the message out to people not listening, which is, like, make sure you're using these, no matter what job you work in, because this whole thing. And just to link back to another point made on the podcast before, the fact that, the point around how, I don't know if they actually said it or not, but this belief that Anthropic went after code first because it's kind of the foundational layer. And then once they got that sorted, basically anything and everything you could do on a computer was fair game. So and that's most jobs these days. So if you're anybody who works with a computer, which is most people, which is so most people, it's scary, it's exciting, it's uncertain, but you can't change what the outcome is going to be. But what you can do is lean into this stuff and play around with it. And that's exactly what we did. I mean, you've been doing it for a particularly long time. I was a bit slower to get fired up about it, but all of our own kind of individual journeys, playing around with lots of different things. testing things, breaking things. A lot of them fail, building little bits of software, building personal things, whether it's a little like thing for managing your personal finances, or for me, building little running dashboards and things like that. Just playing around with this stuff and learning the skills, learning what they can do and what they can't do is never going to be a waste of time, because every job is going to benefit from having this knowledge and having these skills. And where it ends up, nobody knows, but there is going to be a medium term where the more you know about how to use these tools, the better you're going to do in your job and the safer you're going to be. And the bigger changes that happen, they're outside of any of our control, but all we can control is kind of making sure that we're using the technology, we understand it, we're using it kind of safely and sensibly, and we're keeping up to date with what's changing, which is not easy, but as much as possible, keeping up with the news. It's probably, arguably, it's the most important thing to be keeping up to speed on at the moment.
Well, yeah, everything else is bloody depressing. So at least you can get involved with this and put a positive spin on it. And I think the other thing, like one thing I've learned, doing it for a few years, is not to be precious or disheartened with failed experiments or ideas that don't come to fruition. They will, if you could do things in a much quicker pace and much more exponentially, there's going to be a bigger pile of failures and things you leave behind. And you've got to not be precious and just keep going and keep moving and keep experimenting, because eventually you will come to something that's like, yeah, I've nailed that. That's great. That works for these 2 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, cheery, but necessary. No, look, it is what it is. We shouldn't. I think these conversations do get heavy, but it's something that's on people's minds, and I don't think it's. I think it is a conversation that's worth having regularly, because it's something that is affecting everybody. So it's not something we should shy away from. But it is, you do feel a little bit like you're almost being a bit doom and gloom. But I think both of us, we have a mixture of positivity about the opportunity this is providing, but with a sensible amount of fear and uncertainty, because it is changing at a rapid pace and nobody does know exactly where it's going to end up.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, I look forward to the next time we do this and we're floating around like they do in WALL-E, where we're just in these little floating beds.
I'm nearly there. I don't leave this chair.
That's true, actually. Yeah. Okay. All right. That's a wrap for now. See you next time.
That's it for this week's episode of the Measure Pod. We hope you enjoyed it and picked up something useful along the way. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on so you don't miss future episodes.
And if you're enjoying the show, we'd really appreciate it if you left us a quick review. It really helps more people discover the pod and keeps us motivated to bring back more. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.